Good morning, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy weekend to you. We're going to get right to it. Tropical threat here for the southeast. We now have tropical depression number 4 expected to strengthen into tropical storm Debby here over the weekend. And future Debby looks like it's now aiming for the Big Bend, pretty much the exact same place that got hit last August with Hurricane Idalia. The difference with this system is that it is not going to be as strong as Idalia, but it is going to be strengthening up until landfall. Waters are very warm as this system comes inland early on Monday, and there's a chance that it's going to be a high-end tropical storm or even a hurricane, Category 1, when it makes landfall. Almost the exact same intensity as what Beryl was when it came into Texas here just about a month ago. Maybe not quite, but it'll be getting there. Now, the challenges that we have with this are multifaceted. We've got a system that is going to head into an area of record warm water, so there will be some upside to this strength forecast. The other challenge we have is that the steering currents are going to collapse, allowing the system to slow down and have a much more uncertain track next week. And the possibility the system stays over land the entire time and doesn't have a chance to re-strengthen, but still brings incredible amounts of rain into portions of northern Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, even southeastern Virginia next week. Also, the potential for this system to reemerge into the warm waters of the Atlantic and strengthen. It's going to be in a very favorable position to do that with low wind shear. And the question mark is going to be, if it does strengthen, does it try to come back and hit land? Does it go out to sea, or does it ride the coast? And these questions we'll hopefully have answers for soon, but today there's still a lot of uncertainty. The one thing I am very concerned about, though, is the potential threat for a major amount of heavy rainfall and significant, perhaps catastrophic flooding for some of us here in the Carolinas, maybe southeastern Georgia as well, as we get to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week. So I would love to say I have a lot of certainty on this. The one thing that has happened is that the system has become a depression. It is just south of Cuba, going to move over central and western Cuba today into tonight. And after it leaves Cuba, moving into a much more favorable part of the basin where it is going to be able to strengthen perhaps pretty significantly by tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night as it moves in. The other thing, too, is that the threat to the central and southern portion of Florida taking a direct hit has minimized as the system decided to form on the southern part of the track over the south coast of Cuba. Some models yesterday showed it riding the north coast and coming closer to southwest Florida, but it has adjusted westward, and that's not a surprise to me. I think I had mentioned that a little bit in yesterday's video. So anyway, let's take a look at what's going on here. This is the water vapor image, and you can see we still have a pretty disorganized system, but it is a growing system, and it's in a favorable upper-level anticyclone area where they're spreading aloft, and there's certainly favorable conditions for this system to grow some more. The challenge it's had is that it doesn't have a central core, and it's been basically interacting with land over the last 3 days. Once it escapes land and moves into the ocean or into the Gulf, it is going to be in a much more favorable spot to develop. We do have a trough moving through Appalachia into the Carolinas that is starting to tug this system northward. After that trough leaves, we've got a large area of high pressure that is going to build in. And we also have a large area of high pressure here to the east. And what will happen is this system, Debby, will get stuck between the two and will probably slow down. And there's just an incredible amount of moisture with it. So if it slows down in here, be preparing for significant, potentially catastrophic amounts of flooding. This is the infrared image. You can see the center of the storm very close to the south coast of Cuba. This is Cuba. I know this is pink, and Cuba's pink as well. The heaviest rains with this are in bands just to the south of the center, and then well to the north of the center near Andros Island. And this band of heavy rain is going to move into the Miami-Dade area here later this morning. So we may be dealing with some localized flash flooding in South Florida, well away from the storm core. That threat for heavy rain does expand northward across South Florida later today into tonight, and that will be well away from the center. I was hoping to show you all kind of a visible image. It's just starting to get light out as of this recording. I've been trying to record on my lunch breaks during the week, but on the weekends I have events I've got to get to during the day, so this is going to be early on, and I apologize for that. But you can see thunderstorm clouds are going up here at the end of this loop over to the south coast of Cuba here, and it's definitely in a favorable spot to grow. It's just struggling because it's over land for the time being. Here is the radar out of Cuba. Again, you can see some incredibly heavy rain. The center is somewhere in about here, and it's going to track over a pretty thin part of Cuba here as we get to tonight. So after it leaves Cuba later this evening, more than likely it's going to start to begin to strengthen and probably into a tropical storm at that point. The official forecast from the National Hurricane Center has a tropical depression through this afternoon and evening, and then a tropical storm approaching the dry Tortugas, and then strengthening right up to landfall here in the Big Bend early in the day on Monday, probably sometime between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. Monday morning. After that, it's going to track over land, and then the uncertainty grows significantly for Wednesday and Thursday. If this tries to make its way back offshore, it could strengthen, perhaps significantly. If it stays over land, it may not, and there's also a chance that it could even just stall and sit around for several more days and then have a very erratic track. This is from Zoom Earth, just showing you guys kind of where things are. This is our center 30-mile-per-hour tropical depression expected to start to strengthen after it leaves Havana here this afternoon, and then a tropical storm overnight tonight. We do have a tropical storm watch for the Florida Keys, a tropical storm warning for dry Tortugas. The entire west coast of Florida, all the way up to almost the Big Bend. So I think this is Anclote Key, perhaps, south of Cedar Key, is under a tropical storm warning. As the system goes west of you, you'll be on the dirty side. You'll be getting the potential for tropical storm winds. That includes the Tampa Bay area. There will be a potential for tropical storm winds, kind of like what we saw here back with Idalia last August. There's now a hurricane watch for the eastern part of the Big Bend down the coast here, as we are starting to prepare for what potentially could end up being a hurricane as it makes landfall somewhere in this area. And then we've got a tropical storm watch for the rest of the north part of the Appalachia Bay. This could shift westward a little bit towards Apalachicola, Port St. Joe. Again, there's still uncertainty on this track, but overall, the threat for direct impact to South Florida and the East Coast right now is small. Eventually, there may be a growing threat for northeastern Florida and Georgia, depending on where this system ends up going. And we may start to see tropical storm or even hurricane watches posted for northeast Florida up to the Georgia and South Carolina coast by this time tomorrow morning. This is from Tomerberg's website. Again, showing you that the track of the system is going to go over extremely warm water. 70-mile-per-hour forecast here in the morning on Monday. What you don't see is in between here and landfall, there's a chance it could try to get a little bit stronger. I'm not saying a hurricane is likely, but it is possible, so I'm predicting right on the cusp, right on that border. Again, there's not a huge difference between 70 and 75 miles per hour other than that classification. But you will see after it weakens, if it reemerges, it has the potential to re-strengthen again. And this would be Wednesday into Thursday. And I will talk about that future here in just a second. Model tracks are now in much better agreement than yesterday. We have several tracks that are actually farther to the west still, making landfall near Apalachicola. We'll have to keep an eye on that. My official forecast is right here in the middle for the time being. It hasn't shifted much from yesterday. I was west of a lot of the models. But the interesting thing here is that there will be a right bend that is made, and the question mark is, does that take it back over water, or does it keep it over parts of South Georgia and the low country of South Carolina? And we just don't quite know that yet. And you can see here the GFS ensembles, an interesting bend coming here to the right, and then perhaps as high pressure builds in to the east over here and builds westward, it's going to slow the progress of the system and lead to a more erratic motion. And what we could have is a system that finds a way to just sit over the water and stall for maybe as much as 48 hours, which would be very bad news for the coastal Carolinas here. Unlike yesterday, we have more guidance showing that this tries to make a landfall again somewhere in South Carolina or lower North Carolina. Rather than directly out to sea, it's going to spend a few more days over land. And there's a potential down the road that this gets back over water and tries to strengthen here near the coastline of the Northeast. I think the worst wind stays offshore. If it goes inland, then we're not going to see a major wind event, but we will have a major rain event for portions of the Northeast. And you do need to keep an eye on this in Atlantic Canada for next weekend. Again, there's a ton of uncertainty still once we get past Monday. So all of this could still shift quite a bit. And I don't want to promise it's going to look like this, but I do need to make a forecast. And just know that I think this forecast is probably going to change a little bit more. Interestingly, if some reason it gets stuck down in here, there's even still a few ensembles that try to bring it back into the Gulf and strengthen it. Not my forecast at this point, and no model showing that, just a couple of ensembles that give us that false sense of security on the Western Gulf right now. But I'm not forecasting that. It's still something we can't completely rule out at this point. Here's a look at the ensembles. The operational GFS makes a second landfall somewhere near Georgetown, South Carolina. The mean of the models takes it up to about Myrtle Beach or North Myrtle and then up into eastern North Carolina. So a decent chance that either this doesn't even get back over the water or maybe it does and re-strengthens before a second landfall somewhere here in the Carolinas. A lot to be ironed out here, and even if this is right, there's a third landfall in Rhode Island and near Montauk Point here and a fourth landfall near the Bay of Fundy. And anyway, a lot can still change at this point. Here's a look at the ensemble tracks, and you'll see how things have kind of evolved and where the models are taking it. The UK Met is the furthest to the west near Apalachicola. The mean is in the Big Bend, where I'm predicting. The European and GFS a little to the right of that, maybe towards Steinhatchee and Cedar Key. And then things start getting extremely uncertain once we get into the 6th of August, which would be Tuesday morning here. Tuesday afternoon into Wednesday, a huge spread. This is an outlier, but we still have some solutions that keep this here in northern Florida and South Georgia here on Wednesday morning. Others which are moving up into the Outer Banks, and the mean of the models is near the South Carolina coast. So quite a bit of uncertainty still at this point. And as we grow into time, take a look at this ensemble ellipse. This is just extremely murky at this point. So we will continue to do daily videos talking about where this system may go. And that's going to obviously impact our intensity forecast, which, as you can see here, is a very uncertain forecast. The majority of our reliable models do have this becoming a tropical storm on Sunday. There is some support that this gets near or even just past the hurricane threshold before landfall early on Monday. And that's what I'm predicting is a borderline Category 1 hurricane at this point. Certainly, it will cause some damage if that's the point, but it'll be a very small focused area where that happens. Just in general, we're looking at a lot of rain and some gusty winds and some storm surge out of it. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Weakening beyond that, then you see a lot of uncertainty here once we get past Monday and Tuesday. Does it get back over the water and try to re-strengthen? I'll show you the icon model, which shows that happening. Does it stay over land and weaken or keep its own intensity? That's certainly a possibility as well. Ocean water temperatures are very hot. The system will be kind of tracking through here. The warmest waters are just off the coast. So it's in a favorable spot here where it will strengthen perhaps steadily as it continues to build a core. The challenge it's going to have is that it may run out of time to become a hurricane when it gets up into here, but it will be strengthening and probably growing in size at that point. Now, the big question mark is, where does it go? This is the anomaly here, much above average temperatures off the coast here of Georgia and South Carolina. If it finds a way to escape and end up in here, it has got a potential of re-strengthening. It's not going to be rapid, but it will strengthen. And if it carries into this area here, it's going to take a while to kind of slow down. So a lot of unknowns at this point. We just see that the track, if it goes over water, ends up being pretty favorable for it to hold its own. Here's a look at the upper level pattern. And you can see as we head into Sunday, our trough leaves the northeast. We have this weakness in between two areas of high pressure, but what we don't have is a massive trough that could just quickly pull this thing northward. You'll see the high pressure builds in over the top of it here. Kind of see this big high centered over the Rockies. It is going to build and try to link up with the Bermuda high, which is just east of Bermuda. And what that does is it collapses the steering currents and slows down the potential exit point for this system, meaning it may get stuck or just slow to an erratic crawl. You can see that happening here early next week. This is Monday, Tuesday, and it just hasn't made a lot of forward progress. In fact, if you look at the GFS, it does not have a landfall here until early Thursday morning, somewhere near Skidaway Island or near Hilton Head Island. This next trough that comes down does have the chance of finally jostling it northward and pulling it away here next weekend, but when we look at a trough like this that hasn't even entered the North American continent, the certainty level on the timing and the depth of how strong it's going to be is very low. So a lot of uncertainty still at this point. Here's a look at the Icon model, which did pretty good with Beryl. It wasn't right on it, but it did pretty good in pulling it up closer to Houston than the other models. You can see it's got the strengthening starting tomorrow and strengthening up to landfall. It keeps it a tropical storm, though, and has landfall here at about 11 a.m. Eastern time. But it's got the pressure holding its own because of the favorable upper level environment. The system is not just going to die on the doorstep of Georgia here. It's actually going to kind of hold its own. And then take a look at what it does after that. Pulls it over the water and deepens it quickly. Now, I think this is a little bit too extreme. I don't think we're going to be dealing with a Category 2 hurricane over here that's threatening Wilmington, but you get the idea that if it gets over water here, it slows down and it does have the opportunity to strengthen some. Here's a look at the GFS model, which is actually not terribly far off from the Icon. It is farther west, but it is strengthening. Strong tropical storm here with landfall at about 4 in the morning on Monday. Then moving pretty quickly across North Florida and Southeast Georgia and emerging into the ocean here Monday evening. So it's moving a little bit faster than some of the other models. And because of that, it's got the opportunity to deepen over the Gulf Stream. Take a look at this. Tuesday and Tuesday night, it is strengthening to a hurricane and then turning back and stalling or even moving back towards land here by Thursday morning. Very bad scenario if this plays out. It's going to drive all the heavy wind and rain up into Charleston, South Carolina, Hilton Head, Beaufort County. It's going to deepen, and because it's moving so slowly, it's just going to dump incredible amounts of rain over this portion of the low country. The GFS pulls it northward all the way up to Charlotte as a weakening system, and then over towards Raleigh, and then off the coast as we get to Saturday night. Kind of crazy if you think about it. Here's a Canadian model. It is farther west and weaker. It's a possibility, but I don't know yet if this is going to play out, but still keep an eye on this in Panama City. I think in Pensacola, you're okay. Destin, you're okay, but keep an eye on this solution here. It's a lot weaker, though. And then eventually it just tries to maybe find water, but doesn't get back to that. Never really re-strengthens. It just dumps incredible rain here over Georgia and the Carolinas, and then heads out to the north and east. And finally, the European model, the one that we all kind of fell for earlier, well, it is pretty close to the Canadian and the GFS, a little bit farther east of the GFS. It's not as strong. You will see that it also takes its time moving across Florida and Georgia and doesn't reemerge until Tuesday morning. So it'll be weaker. But because of that favorable upper level environment, it strengthens significantly here between Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning. A drop in pressure of 15 millibars, and then a system that is hugging the coast of South Carolina and maybe trying to make a landfall again, this time near or just east of Charleston here on Thursday afternoon. But that's incredible that it's even going to take that long to try to come inland. So we could have a system that's in Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, or off the coast, all as we get to next Thursday. Just a lot of spread here in what may happen. Here's a look at our tropical model, the HWRF, showing that the system will start to gain a core here overnight tonight and really tomorrow morning. And as a result, winds at the coast may gust close to tropical storm force around Tampa, Clearwater, and those areas. It's building structure coming right up into Appalachia Bay here. This is 11 o'clock tomorrow night. This is Monday morning around 2 in the morning, and maybe approaching hurricane intensity at this point and then spinning down a little bit over Georgia. This particular run does not have the system getting back over the water on Tuesday. It keeps it over the low country of Georgia and then eventually South Carolina. Better news if we don't want to see a strengthening storm, but bad news if we're talking about heavy amounts of rain. We can look at the HMON and all that, but I mean, again, these models are very finicky here, and they're not necessarily what I trust. I like the global models in this situation. Here's the European. You'll see the strongest winds are on the east side of the system, potential gusts of 30 to 40 miles per hour along the coast, maybe even 50 miles per hour north of Tampa Bay. The time frame for that would be during the day tomorrow and then tomorrow night especially. Winds get gusty in northeast Florida and southern Georgia as well during the day Monday and especially Monday night. And then they may start ramping up here in the Carolinas here by Tuesday night and Wednesday. Here's another look at the Euro farther north. No major wind yet, but then you can see things coming up the coast here Monday night, Tuesday morning. Winds picking up on the South Carolina coast. And you see this is just a very slow evolving system. Yes, offshore there may be hurricane force winds if it strengthens the way the models are showing. And you can even see wind gusts over 60 miles per hour on the coast here. You can see that on Hilton Head and on Data Island and those areas here sometime on Tuesday into Wednesday. Winds will die down some, but we may have an inland wind threat as we get to Thursday and Friday. We can look at these models all day long, but I just don't think they're all going to nail it at this point. Just a lot of uncertainty. Farther north, we will see these winds picking up in the mid-Atlantic region here early next weekend, and then maybe affecting coastal New England on Saturday and Sunday. So still about a week before this potentially gets up into New England due to that high pressure just blocking things. Finally, taking a look here at Atlantic Canada, you may start to feel the effects of this system, depending on where it goes here, as soon as next Sunday into Monday. So we still have 8 or 9 days potentially if the European is correct. The NAM model, not to be used for intensity, but I did want to show you the rain bands out of it. Yeah, it's going way too deep on this, but we are going to see a few showers and storms that are drenching South Florida here today into tonight. There is a slight tornado threat I'll talk about in a minute. And then the real nasty stuff affects the Tampa Bay area tomorrow afternoon and then moves into the Big Bend and North Florida tomorrow night. And the worst of it's probably going to be early in the day on Monday across the Big Bend and South Georgia. And you can see things are not moving very quickly here on this model. So the likely time for winds to start ramping up will be overnight tonight in the Keys, and then early in the day Sunday on the southwest coast, later in the day Sunday for the Tampa Bay area, and then the strongest winds start hitting late Sunday night around the Big Bend, and then continuing into early Monday across North Florida. Maybe Tuesday and Wednesday up into the Carolinas, but again, this can possibly shift quite a bit. Taking a look at rain totals here, this is the bigger concern that I personally have, and you'll see why. We've got amounts here near coastal Georgia and South Carolina that are over 20 inches if the GFS is correct, and maybe as high as 24 inches. So 2 feet of rain falling in 10 days is not going to be good. North Florida is going to see maybe half a foot. The Tampa Bay area, because of this onshore flow here, could see several inches, maybe even over 10 inches. South Florida, not as much, but locally heavy rains are always possible with a tropical system like this. And we just, again, cannot trust every exact number here, but just have an idea that this is going to be a very wet system, a very slow-moving system. And honestly, if someone were going to ask me what the heaviest amount of rain would be out of this system, until I know the track, it's very uncertain, but there's 30-inch potential from this kind of system. And we're talking Florence kind of rains. So obviously we got to be concerned with something like this. The European model's got 25 inches on Hilton Head Island, 16 to 17 around Charleston, 13 in Myrtle, 8 inches around Raleigh. We need rain, but we don't need this kind of rain for sure. And even parts of Florida seeing potential for up to a foot of rain near and to the east of our storm track. So the Western Panhandle is not going to see much out of this unless it tries to stall in North Florida. But it's going to be feast or famine. Famine over here, feast over here, and not the kind of feast we want. Farther up the coast, the GFS has some heavy rain interacting with our boundary later next week into the weekend. Maybe some flooding potential here in the mid-Atlantic into parts of the interior of the Northeast as well. The Europeans got incredible rains for southern Maryland, the D.C. area, Eastern Shore, Delmarva. Maybe a foot of rain, depending on where this thing ends up winding up. It could go west, and the mountains could be dealing with this kind of a dumping, or it could go east, and we're talking about the coast getting heavy rainfall. If you blend everything together, this is from weatherbell.com, you'll see a blend of every model gives us 21, 22 inches of rain near Charleston, South Carolina. That place doesn't take much to flood, so this would be a very significant event if correct. Amounts of 6 to 12 inches into parts of New England, so just really crazy at this point. There will be a tornado threat later today and tonight across southwest Florida. We may have a watch issued. Certainly a few warnings will be possible. Tomorrow, that threat shifts away from South Florida. It impacts the Bay Area. It also impacts Orlando all the way up tomorrow night into northeastern Florida, including the Space Coast. On Monday, that threat for tornadoes climbs for northeastern Florida, coastal Georgia, and the low country of South Carolina. So that's what we have to talk about with Debby, or future Debby. It's not there yet. I do want to turn your eyes to the next system here in the main development region, not organized for the time being, but holding together. As I mentioned in videos in July, that we were just going to see this becoming the start of a very active period, and we do have some support for this system, maybe trying to develop next weekend by the time it moves into the Western Caribbean. It's probably got a few days before it can do much. You can see there is wind shear coming in out of the southwest from this upper low, and there's some southerly wind shear out ahead of it. So once it escapes this dry air pocket that's in place and moves into the Caribbean, it may take about 6-7 days, but I do think it's our next area of interest. If you look at ensembles, and again, very uncertain at this point, you see there is some support as we get to next Friday and Saturday for something forming in here a little south and west of where our current system is. And if we take this along in time, it does threaten the Gulf Coast potentially as we get to the following week with a tropical system. We can look at operational models, but they're going to shift. But there's support here for something moving into the Gulf in about 8 to 9 days that we do need to keep an eye on. It's a ways off. This can change quite a bit, but there's support for something at this point. And if you look at the GFS ensemble, you see kind of a similar approach, potentially a feature moving into the central Gulf here. This is a week from tomorrow, so 8 days from now, but some support for some sort of system that has a good chance of developing into maybe the following system, which would be Ernesto. And this one has some more intense solutions that we're not going to get too tied up in, but the operational GFS is hinting that after Debby moves out here, we start to see development south of Cuba as we get to next Friday and Saturday. So about a week from today, and generally speaking, with the high building back in, it would take it to either the central or western Gulf. One solution to this shouldn't scare you at this point. It is 270 hours away, but we're watching trends at this point, and there have been quite a few solutions showing a significant storm at this point. Again, don't want people to freak out just yet, but something that we're going to have to watch here. You can see 4 of the last 5 model runs have had a hurricane somewhere in the central or western Gulf. So Texas, Louisiana, keep an eye on it. The rest of the Gulf, even the Yucatan, Cuba, Florida, keep an eye on it, but it's still about a week away from forming into anything. All right, well, that was a lot. I wanted to keep this short, but a lot to talk about. But as always, I appreciate your time. If you could, please like this video, subscribe. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. My aim is to help folks out. That is my God-given gift as a meteorologist. And I couldn't do it without my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who, when I was in a dark spot in my life, I didn't want to do something like this as a service for other people. I wanted to serve myself, my friends, my family, people who are kind of disappointing to me, not because they're bad people, but because we are all sinners. But the glory of the Lord and his forgiveness has given me kind of this new life, the ability to help other people, to pray over other people in situations that we just have no control over, including the weather. We can be negative towards everything, or we can have appreciation, and I choose the appreciation. Psalm 118:24, King James Version, "This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." And people that rejoice and are glad are people that are going to serve others and fulfill the kingdom of God, and we need more folks up there. So that is my charge to you, no matter what your belief. Just know that I am praying for you, and that I rejoice in every day, even in stressful situations like this. And I pray that you are doing what you can and what God has given you to encourage and lift up other folks. Hope you have a wonderful day, and catch up with you soon. God bless.